Hey, it's All for His Glory Alone, also known as the Dog Preacher, and I'm here with Matthew 4:19, also known as Len, and I'm here with Trust in Jesus, also known as the guy in the Home Depot parking lot. Hey, what's up, Carlos?
It slows, you jerk. No, I'm just kidding. How's it going?
So how are you guys this evening?
I'm awesome. I'm printing shipping labels now for an eBay item that it's been sitting on my shelf for 2.5 years. So I'm glad to get rid of it. So
Oh, and by the way, public, Len isn't actually that short. His camera is just positioned it that way.
yeah, I'm using my iPad, so it's just setting on it's pointing at the ceiling right now, and yeah
Yeah, so no
hovering.
no short jokes, people.
You,
I can just turn
don't
the
say,
camera off
James.
too.
There you go. And Carlos, what's up with you?
Nah, nothing much, brother. Just here, man. Was going through the book that Dr. Bob sent me the other day.
Oh,
I
good, you
actually
got it.
got it, so yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for your help. I appreciate it. It's a good read. I don't know if you got a chance to look at it, but yeah, it's good stuff. In fact, encourage you as well to look at it, Len. It's I don't know if you read it. It's The End of the World According to Jesus by Dr. Robert Morey.
Oh, eschatology, my favorite topic.
No way, no way. Are you being sarcastic or for real?
No, I'm being insanely sarcastic. So many people have perverted eschatology that it's a discussion. I would almost rather talk about women's golf than eschatology,
Well,
honestly.
Dr. Bob is very unique when it comes to. Okay, let me back up so I don't make him sound wrong. Unique in the sense of he has a different approach, not unique in what he actually teaches. Because if he's unique in what he teaches, then what he teaches is that obviously false. But he did a years ago. He did a tape set, and yes, I said tape because it was on tape originally. Called "Jewish Keys to Apocalyptic Literature." Now, he laughed when he found out what the title of that was. He didn't choose the title because on the tape set itself, he says to beware of people who use the term keys. And so I pointed it out to him and he laughed because he wasn't the one that chose the title. But it was such a great series. And I'm going to try to get my hands on it again. I used to go through all his tapes. I used to borrow all his tapes from my friend Jeff and just go through all of them and then listen to them again. And then we started transferring them to CDs when he opened his church in California, and some of them didn't get made into CDs. Some of them became parts of the college material that he was doing, and was far too expensive for me or anyone like me to get. And then some of them I think got lost or stolen actually. But he comes at it in a way that's very interesting. That's different than most eschatological people do. Um, so he makes it more interesting. But that's one area where I'm kind of weak too. I don't understand the millennium and what it is and how it works and all that kind of stuff. Though I've read Revelation a couple times, I it just didn't soak in or it just didn't stay in my memory banks. So I'll have to go back and look again. The millennium, as far as I do understand, I hold to the view that there's going to be a literal millennium that Christ is going to have here on the earth and for a literal 1,000 years and all that kind of stuff. So, but anyways, Dr. Bob makes it pretty interesting. He's kind of not your everyday theologian, and he's not afraid to disagree with the big guys, and that's what makes it more interesting to look into and see why he thinks what he thinks.
Yeah, I got caught up in the whole, post millennial theonomy thing for a while,
Yeah.
and there's some people who just like, well, J.D. Hall says, eschatology, when it comes to theology, eschatology should be like the caboose on your train. It's
Exactly.
if eschatology is the engine, you're doing theology wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And the postmillennial and the dispensationalist, I believe, both make that equal error. And I don't mean like your traditional dispensationalist like John MacArthur. I mean like your Ken or Tim LaHaye left behind goofballs.
Right.
You know, the Jim Baker and who is it? Hal Lindsey for sure, and John Hagee. Those guys, it's them and the postmillennial reconstructionists make the same error. They make eschatology the theological engine on their train, and it should be the caboose, you know. So Justin Peters calls like postmillennialism an overrealized eschatology, and I think you could say the same for, in that they make the gospel everything. Everything is the gospel, the gospel of the kingdom, and everything, we're in the kingdom because I don't know. It's
right.
For me, I listen to someone like Dustin Seegers, who is a historical premillennial guy who, based on what you just said, that kind of describes you. You believe there's a literal 1,000 years and stuff, and but most of those would believe that the rapture is post-tribulation, pre-wrath.
Can you say that one more time, because your audio dropped out the last part?
The historical premillennialists would believe that the rapture is post-tribulation.
Okay.
So there is no the saints being spared. And that comes mostly from First Thessalonians chapter 1. But then when I hear an amillennial like Matt Slick go through the same set of verses and exegete, for example, Revelation 20, where it's, Revelation 20 talks about the 1,000-year millennial reign, and the 1,000 is repeated in 6 consecutive verses. And in Hebrew literature, the repetition is used for emphasis.
Sure.
So I used to read that as a dispensationalist, and that affirmed my position. Like, well, there's a literal 1,000-year reign. But then Matt Slick shows all of these Old Testament verses where Jesus owns God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. Well, what? Not on the 1,001st? And
but here's the issue I have with that. If should you want me to interject now, or did you want to finish?
Well, I was just going to say he goes through a multitude of verses where 1,000 is used it can't possibly be interpreted literally, Okay. So I think there's good arguments and that's where my greater point is that the only thing I see untenable eschatologically is postmillennialism. I think is just completely untenable under the scripture, and that's not to say that it's unbiblical or that it's heretical. And the Hal Lindsey version of premillennial dispensationalism, I also find that. So I'm somewhere between the historical premillennial and amillennial. So, but yeah, what were you going to say about the 1,000 years?
The problem I have with that argument about the word 1,000 being used in other places where it's not literal is the context itself lets you know that. When, for example, in 2 Peter, where it says a day is 1,000 years and 1,000 years is a day, the context is that time doesn't mean the same thing to God that it means to us.
Correct.
That's all it means, right? So, but that's the context lets you know that. I don't really see any reason why the 1,000-year reign is not literal. I don't see any reason why the 100. Here's the one that I part ways with, Len. I don't know if you've heard this. And this comes from Calvinists, like Sovereign Grace Calvinists. You get some people that say the 144,000 isn't literal. It's just talking about a lot of people, and it includes men and women. And the part of the Bible where it says they have not known women or something like that. It's just talking about being battle ready, because like with a boxer or a fighter, they used to tell them not to sleep with their wives or whatever like that before a battle because it weakens their legs and weakens their body or whatever like that, being battle ready. And I sat back and I scratched my beard and I said, boy, you're having to do a lot of work to interpret this. The verse simply says 12,000 men from 12 tribes, and these men have not known women. Pretty plain. 12,000 men from 12 tribes, and they're virgins. And somehow you got men and women and children out of that. And it's like, so whenever I encounter an all-millennialist, I'm like, you guys are having to bend over backwards to come up with these interpretations. Like, if you just read it for what it says.
You notice most millennials are Presbyterian. And it's like, Presbyterians do that with the covenants, the covenant of works and the covenant of grace and all that. I saw a great meme that was it was a Presbyterian Bible, and it said it said Holy Bible, Old Testament and same testament in different administration, instead of saying New Testament. Yeah, it was pretty funny. But
yeah, and the thing is, they buy into infant baptism, and I still, I'm a high school graduate who spent a good amount of years studying the cults and reading the Bible feverishly. So now that I'm in that condition where my eyesight isn't good and everything, I still have the knowledge and I can still look it up online. But I don't have PhDs and I don't have degrees and all that stuff like that. But I could very simply, with full confidence, say, here's my car keys. Show me anywhere in the Bible where you have a baby and water together, and there's a baptism being done, and it's done as an ordinance of the church, and you can have my car. And I've done challenges like that where I've offered money and things like that. I even pissed off this pastor who was bad mouthing my pastor in a bookstore, and I just brought up the whole thing about infant baptism. I says, that's cool. Could you show me a Bible verse? Could you show me a context? And he went into like all this tradition and how circumcision did this and it changed to that. And I said, that's all. Hey, that's cool. Could you show me that from the Bible? And he got pissed at me. Any pastor who gets pissed at you because you say, show me from the Bible, run to the hills, as Iron Maiden would say. So, but I have brothers that I love, even the pastor that is a friend of mine now that I go to his church when I can. He's a all millennialist, and he thinks that the Antichrist has already happened, that it was Nero. East and all that's already happened, that the devil is bound, that's already happened. And I'm sitting there going, this is crazy, because the Bible never says that the devil being bound is that before the cross he prevented the spreading of the gospel to the Gentiles, but then after the cross the gospel is able to go to the Gentiles because he was bound. Because didn't the Bible say?
Well, let me ask you this:
let me just finish this one point, and then you can ask. They'll say, didn't Paul say that I tried many times to go whatever, but Satan prevented me? So this time Satan wasn't preventing him, so he must have been bound. I'm like, where do you? That's a leap. That's a leap. But go ahead.
Well, if Satan was preventing the gospel from going forth, who has the power here? Who's sovereign?
Exactly.
I mean, Satan is on God's leash. He's God's. Hell is God's hell. Satan is under his control, and like I don't get that whole line of thinking. Again, it's one of those things like where is it stated clearly in Scripture, and that's a pretty rare form of amillennial, because there are amillennials that are very positive in their eschatology, and
Sure.
then there are some who are negative. But most really recognize the ebbs and flows of the progression of history as it unfolds.
But it's a pretty standard position of all millennialists, though, that Satan is bound.
Well, that's more post millennial, actually.
I don't know. Look into it, because every all millennial I know believes that Satan is bound, and they just say he's bound, and they explain it the way I just explained it.
Was he bound
But
with a literal chain?
well, no. They don't think it's a literal chain.
But that's one of the arguments that they make, because again, Revelation 20 talks about the binding of Satan with chains being locked in a pit. So there's a literal pit with a literal key with the lock on it. Literal chains.
Irritates me. I went through that on one of my videos, and one thing you have to understand about parables or symbolic writing or whatever the deal is, apocalyptic literature, just because there are symbols used does not mean everything in the context is symbolic. For example, no, there isn't a literal key and a literal padlock that you buy from the store that's on a door, because Satan is not a physical being, he's a spiritual being. But there is a literal pit called the abyss, and there is a literal place, and he's literally being kept there in that location, because Satan is not an omnipresent being. He's a local being. He can only be in one place at one time. He is literally being kept in a pit. When I say I lock away something, lock away just means that you're bound or kept in a place. It doesn't mean that there needs to be a lock, there needs to be a door, or there needs to be a chain. I watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The first season of Buffy, the master vampire is bound or locked underground in an old temple because of some spell, and he's in the first half of the season he's trying to break out of that. There's no door. He just can't go past a certain point. He puts his hand up, and there's like a force field that keeps him in there, and so he has to try to figure out a way to break that spell that keeps him down there. Well, that's actually, without the creators of Buffy knowing this, and they've done this many, many times on the show, that's actually a picture or type of what was going to be with Satan, where Satan is going to be put into a place where he cannot leave. And the Master, by the way, is supposed to be the most evil, one of the oldest, most evil vampires in existence. So in a sense, that is a type of Satan, a typology of Satan. So you have him bound underground in kind of this pit, and that's so the reason why I know the pit is literal is because it's referred to as the abyss, and the abyss is referred to in the gospel when the demons are being sent into the pigs' bodies, and they say, "Do not send us to the abyss," with the definite article in front of it, the abyss, not don't put us in a hole, don't put us in someplace dark, the abyss. It's a place. It's a literal place, and that's the same reference used in Revelation where it talks about him being put there. So it's a holding tank. It's a place that the demons and the devil don't want to be. So it's just the silliness that it's symbolic. The problem is, Len, that I have with all millennials is everything's symbolic. Everything. Like everything, like that's how they interpret the entire everything I've ever talked to them about, except for maybe the 5 points of Calvinism, things like that. But I'm talking about when it comes to their ideology about end times or heaven or whatever, and everything's symbolic. And it's like, why? Just because apocalyptic literature uses symbolism doesn't mean that it doesn't have literal information there also. But anywho, I could ramble on and on. Carlos, did you have anything that you wanted to say about this?
No, I'm fine, thank you. Just listening in.
Okay. Dr. Bob said something to me very, very wise a few years ago. He says many things wise. But this is what he said. prophecy can only be understood completely after it's fulfilled. So when you look at the Old Testament prophecies, we can understand them completely because they were many of them were fulfilled in Christ. They were fulfilled in the Jews coming into their land, and they're fulfilled in certain things. But he said those things that are future prophecies, he says we can speculate and we can wrestle on them, and some of us are probably going to be more accurate than others. But it says nobody really knows for sure until it's fulfilled, and then we can go back and go, oh, just like Isaiah 53:5. Obviously Christ. But did they know that until Christ was hanging on that cross? Or and then they said, wait a second. Isaiah 53:5 says he was beaten, he was scourged, by his stripes we are healed. It talks about, the prophecy, you will look on him whom you pierced my. Oh, now it makes sense. Now it makes sense.